Hey guys. Okay, so about a month ago, I attended a presentation that was put on by BDQ, Building Design Queensland. As part of that presentation, they interviewed Melissa from Concepts Unlimited, and she shared her experience last year in a house fire. More importantly though, she talked through some of the lessons that she learnt from that experience, lessons that she's carried through to her own personal renovation and also clients' renovations going forward. Now, I found this presentation really powerful, and I've been sharing snippets of it with everyone ever since. So I thought, you know what, since it had such an impact on me, why don't I reach out to her and see if she's prepared to share her story again with you guys through our weekly videos. Thankfully, she's agreed. So that's exactly what we're going to do today. Let's jump behind the computer. Okay, so what we're going to do is I'm going to quickly rattle off some basic information that I sort of took away from the previous presentation. And by all means, jump in if I get any of the facts incorrect. But okay, from what I remember, it was April last year. You were in the process of doing your own personal renovation. So basically you were renting a property at Stafford. You'd only just moved into that rental sort of property. It was a detached house and you had both yourself, your husband, your two young daughters, I think it was, yes, and a puppy.
And a puppy, yes.
What I'd love to hear is what happened on that morning. Walk us through the whole experience.
Okay, it was the Friday before the Anzac Day long weekend. My husband's a builder and I was expecting usually at about 5 o'clock he would have already left for work that day. Luckily for us, he hadn't. And he actually heard some noises, like some banging noises. I think he thought maybe the kids had fallen out of bed or something like that. So we actually came up twice to investigate what the noises were, but he didn't see anything suspicious or smell anything or anything at that point. It was at around probably just after 5 o'clock, maybe 10 past 5, that the fire alarms, so the smoke alarm started going off. And it was at that point we realized that there was actually quite a substantial fire. So what happened from that point is my husband quickly trying to wake our two girls, get them out of their rooms, find the dog. Luckily, in some instances we had baby gates, so the dog couldn't really get out of the room that we were in, but it did make getting out of the house a little bit more difficult.
Because I'll just jump in, at that point you guys were fast asleep, weren't you? Aside from your husband, yes, he was out the back or something, yeah, like that.
That's right. So luckily for us, he had his shoes on, he had his clothes on, he had his keys in his pocket, which was a big thing, but we were literally just startled awake. So I had one child in bed with me, which made it a bit easier, and the other one was in their bedroom right across the hall from us, so really close by. But it didn't make it, I guess, any less scary. And I think what was really surprising is there was a lot of smoke already. And the first thing I said to him is, "This is a real fire." And he's like, pretty much, "Yes, it's a real fire and we need to get out straight away."
Do you remember what your first thought was when you woke up? Were you processing it or were you just adrenaline rush?
I just wanted to get out of the house. I think at that, I didn't really think of any possessions at that stage. We didn't even have shoes. The girls didn't have shoes. Like, we were in our bedrooms, like we could have grabbed a blanket or something like that, but you just didn't think about it. I grabbed my engagement and wedding rings that was sitting right next to the bed, and I did sort of go back and grab them. That's the only thing that I really got, but it was like a couple of meters where we were. I didn't even have a phone, so he had a phone on him. And one of my daughters had her little bunny in her hand that she'd taken out of her bed. The main issues that we had is that when there's a fire, all the electrical systems are triggered. So there was no power in the house. So it was dark. It was April. So there was no sun coming up yet. So it was very difficult. And we were in a house that we weren't familiar with. So we'd only lived there for about 4 weeks. And the house is kind of quite dark anyway. But yeah, we just couldn't really see a thing. The only exit that we had, every other exit was actually past the fire, the point of the fire. My husband knew where the fire was. I didn't at that point, and to be honest, I didn't ask. Yeah. I just saw lots of smoke and we got out. He had already opened the spare bedroom door and saw that there was like a wall of fire. So he knew that it was nothing that he could put out at that point. So we tried to go down the stairs. My daughter got a bit of a blood nose from us all trying to race down a very tight sort of stairwell. And that's probably another point in having like a decent sized stairwell. And I can understand why now in buildings and commercial buildings they say that, because with 2 kids, 2 adults and a dog all trying to rush down in the dark. And then the other issue we had was the garage door obviously wouldn't open because it's also powered by electricity. The granny flat that was next to it, that actually had power because it was on its own subboards. We had a little bit of light from there, but there was no windows in the garage, so we couldn't really see. And then he manually opened the garage door and we got out of the house. I then tried to alert the neighbours because the smoke was going into their house and I didn't know how bad the fire was going to get. So my first concern was we had no neighbours on the other side, but we did have neighbours right next to us. It was still a bit of a distance away, but I was still a bit concerned. I couldn't wake them up. So we were yelling and screaming and knocking on their door. They didn't wake up. And then I sort of went onto the street. Wade was calling the fire brigade at this point, and he was also getting our cars out. So we had 3 cars. He had his truck and 2 other cars. So because he had keys, we were able to, he was able to get all the cars out onto the street. He just backed them onto the street one after the other and sort of blocked the road. It took about 20 minutes, I'd say, for the fire brigade to arrive.
Wow.
Yeah, quite a long time. An ambulance did come as well, just to make sure that we were okay. I didn't really look back at the house, to be honest. There was just a lot of smoke. I couldn't really see a huge amount of fire. And I think obviously having a brick house with a tin roof, you know, there wasn't like, it was even when we look back at the videos and photos, you know, the structure from the outside, it doesn't look, you know, I think if it was a Queenslander or something with a lot of timber and those types of materials, it probably would have went up a lot faster, but because it was a solid brick house, even from the outside, it took a longer time to burn. The fire brigade to gain access had to actually ram through the front door because everything was key locked. Extremely dangerous. So this is something that I've learned, that I would never ever have key locks on my doors, no matter how safe it makes me from people coming in. Every single window had security screens on it. My keys were actually in a bag that was past the fire, so I wouldn't have had access to the keys. And I probably would have had to try and, like, in that moment, try and remember how to open a garage door manually, which, to be honest, I don't really know how to do that. And I would have probably panicked. And I also at that stage didn't have my phone. So I may have had to go back in, try and find my phone and be with the girls. So honestly, if he wasn't there and he was alert and awake and he was thinking all of these things, I think the situation would have been a lot more frightening than it was for me, and particularly the young girls. They were only 5 and 6 at the time. So I had a preppy in a year 1. And our puppy was 4 months old. So he was very small. So lucky I was able to carry him really easily. I think some of the other things that really took me is that there was a couple of different exit points, but there was a few rooms that created like almost where you couldn't get out. So you were, once we were in that point, the only option we really had was to go downstairs. And again, it was more key locks and a garage door. So that was probably the frightening thing. And also the lack of lighting. So, you know, if you don't have a phone and it's the middle of the night and you don't know your way around, or you can't see through the smoke, is, yeah, trying to find your way out. That was probably the scariest thing of it all. And then just the aftermath of what do you do when you realize that pretty much everything's gone, even if the house wasn't completely burnt to the ground, everything's pretty much water or smoke damaged. Lucky for us, we had insurance. So even on a rental, we had contents insurance, probably not enough, but we had, you know, a significant amount. There was things that probably contributed to the fire getting worse. Obviously, as an interior designer, I had a lot of like cushions and pillows and things stored in the room where the fire occurred. So I think that's why the fire went up very fast. But there was, yeah, it was obviously scary. And then the weeks after that, just trying to, you know, find somewhere else to live and rebuild items. And this was in the midst of COVID, so things just weren't available. So finding dining chairs or finding a lounge was like, even if you have money, it was almost impossible to do.
Yeah, I remember the first time I heard your story, I was like, it's just, if any one of those things had gone differently along that process, we'd be having a totally different conversation here. And so if Wade hadn't been there on site, if he'd actually gone off to a construction site, or if he didn't happen to have his phone on him or his keys on him, all of those things just fell perfectly into alignment.
Definitely. And I feel like I would have panicked. He was very calm. And I think his main focus was to get us out. I wouldn't have tried to save the cars, to be honest. I wouldn't have even, it wasn't even in my thoughts, was to get it out. You know, having things like shoes and like clothes close by, because, you know, it was freezing cold. The girls were in summer pajamas because it really wasn't that cold. But when you're outside at 5 o'clock in the morning, it was. You know, he had his work server underneath in the basement, which he grabbed. But, you know, there's gas line to the house. The cars obviously have petrol, like things could have gone you know, a lot worse. So I'm just grateful that there was working smoke detectors. And while it seemed that maybe the one in the room didn't go off because of the delay, or whether it was not working, whether it was taken out when the fire started, that's something we won't ever really know. But it is, having all the smoke alarms going off at once, it is very loud, and it did alert us, because without that, maybe we wouldn't have woken up.
Yeah. Okay, so now let's talk about what actually caused this fire, or what you think caused this fire.
Yes. So we met with the fire department pretty quickly after the fire had happened. My parents came and picked up the kids so that we didn't have them, and then we went to see obviously what damage was done inside the house, because at that point we hadn't been back inside. Basically, they believed that it was from a lithium battery explosion. They haven't really confirmed exactly, but they believe from the initial investigations it was. So from potentially a massage gun or a stick vacuum, they were both charging at the exact same point. So that was somewhere where like everything was destroyed in that room. There was nothing left of really much evidence. So that they believe that was the point of ignition. So he told me he personally charges all of his items in a bathtub, an empty bathtub, because he said he sees fires that start this way all the time. And to me, that was terrifying.
I can't believe it. The number of people I've spoken to since who have reported just said the exact same thing. Like, yes, it is so, so common. And I'm now anal about that. I run around the house turning off all the batteries and all that sort of stuff when they're not being charged, because I'm like, I don't want that to happen.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that, you know, making sure that you don't mix up charges, because that was something where we just moved. They were like, is it possible you've mixed them up? And we didn't think so. But it's something where, you know, when Wade came out to talk to me, I was like, but there's nothing in that room. And he said, well, there was the vacuum cleaner. And I was like, surely that wouldn't cause a fire, especially one that was just so fierce, and it spread really quickly through the ceilings. So my girls' rooms was a room right next to that. And that's the other thing is, you know, being mindful of where you're charging items. So obviously, if it's a laundry with lots of tiles, and the other thing is 2-pack cabinetry does not burn very well. Cabinets were the last thing to sort of go under, basically, you know, be taken out. So I think that you could see that the fire was having difficulty burning through, you know, the 2-pack cabinetry, whereas the plasterboard, those type of materials, it just spread very, very quickly. Pretty much things down on the lower floor were not as damaged. So it was mostly the higher things. So I'd say there was sparks or something that ignited the ceiling, and then from there everything spreading just got worse.
Wow. Okay, so now I know you've got some photos and some videos that you're happy to share. Yes. So let's bring those up and just
share my screen.
Story.
Hopefully it's not too confronting for everyone. Just going to turn off the sound as well. You can't. Actually, I don't know why I can't turn that off.
I can't hear it technical, so you're all good.
Technical difficulties. But basically, you can see that pretty much everything was sort of pulled apart. All the ceilings and everything had caved in. There was quite a few rooms. This is where the fire actually started. So everything in there was almost completely destroyed. The one thing that surprised me is I had some marble tables and there was nothing left of them. They were completely gone. That's the stairs where we made our exit out. But a lot of this mess is actually from the ceiling, and the bathrooms were quite relatively intact. We've sort of moved things around by this stage because we were looking to see if anything was salvageable, but pretty much most of the items weren't really, because of the smoke and the chemicals that the fire department actually used. You can see the air conditioning unit was completely disintegrated, but you can see the clothes in the cupboards are actually intact. So it sort of didn't really burn them very well. And
I think it's crazy that it's so hit and miss. Like there's certain areas that just look decimated, and other areas where it's like you think you could just pick it up and put it back on.
I know. And the fire guy said there's just so much like chemicals and things. Yeah. And my cleaner had actually been the day before, but it doesn't feel like it. It feels like there was just mess everywhere because obviously stuff was kind of getting moved around. But you can see where it started to melt all the metal, but the girls' beds were kind of intact. And this is where the fire spread through the cupboard. So they were in that connecting room. So that's quite scary to me, is that it was already coming through. And the fire department threw all their mattresses out because they said it can reignite like at a later time. So they got rid of all of the flammable items, so bed sheets, and we actually were able to salvage a few of their like special items from them throwing it out the window. So they just smashed the glass and threw it out. This house was a complete write-off. There was nothing that could be saved. It had to be demolished, unfortunately. But yeah, this is our girls' playroom. The Barbie houses, everything were all whooped, but they weren't, you know, they weren't damaged, but everything was, yeah, just not in the shape that it should have been.
Yeah.
I'll show you
covered in chemicals and covered in smoke and all of that sort of stuff.
Pretty much. This photo is actually my gin cart. So that was full of alcohol. So I'm assuming that was like firebomb on the day. So that's a bit of a pity. And you can see where it sort of burnt like a pretty big hole in there. These were some of the items that the fire brigade actually threw out. That some of them you can see were on fire. So I think they were hosing them out there. This is a room where this was a clothing rack, so that was full of clothes. We obviously had moved from a fairly big house. We'd moved from a 5-bedroom, pretty much brand new house into a much smaller sort of house. So while we're building a new house, so it's lots of things were stored in different places. And yeah, there's some few racks there and a desk that were completely destroyed. And this was just my friend's baby shower gift that was actually going to be the next day. It kind of survived, but probably not in a good shape for a baby. So Wade did filter through. He wore a hazmat suit. He did go through and he did try and, like, our dog's ashes that were in there, that were still in their containers, so we're able to salvage them. He did go through and try and get rid of some of our personal items, because the other thing was we'd found that people had gone through the house after we had left.
Really?
Yeah, so I don't know whether they were just curious or whatever. But yeah, so then I just wanted to get rid of things out of there that were personal to us, but basically. But this was the house that we actually moved from. So you can see that our furniture was actually quite nice and fairly new. So pretty much everything in these photos were pretty much either completely destroyed by fire or water or smoke damage. So we had quite a lot of furniture downstairs in the garage, and all the water had come through the hardwood floors, and all the fire brigade and lots of things were damaged just from smoke, even in cupboards. So it's amazing how quickly it can come through.
Okay, so now let's get to the most important stuff. What are the lessons that you've actually learned through this? What have you taken forward to your own personal renovation and also clients' renovations? And I'll get you just to stop. Yeah, there we go.
Yeah. So basically, the biggest thing was we hadn't quite started our build. Now, for us, also on a financial aspect, this was very good because we actually had money in the bank, and financial payouts from insurance companies take a long time. So I think it took like 6 or 7 weeks to see any kind of money. So anyone who has insurance, even if they have insurance, they probably still would need some sort of immediate help. I also backed into a post going to Pet Barn that day. Probably shouldn't have been driving. And, you know, if I knew of anyone in this situation, I would definitely offer them more support in just getting basic kind of like toothbrushes and pajamas. And my friend lent me shoes, but she's like 2 or 3 sizes bigger than me. So I probably looked pretty ridiculous that day at Maya trying to buy things. But yeah, some of the things that we did differently in the design is making sure we have an access point from our upper level. So we'd added a balcony onto the rear of the house that could easily get onto a roof and also into our pool. So while we didn't want to have to jump from a second story, you can jump from the roof easily into our pool, and hopefully our kids don't figure this out later.
Yes, exactly.
And use that as a bit of fun. But yeah, that was probably the main thing. The other thing as well is we've installed smoke detectors in every room of the house, even if they are not required. So it's in the laundry, it's in our garage. So we've got special smoke detectors that are suitable for users in basement level and garage.
That blew my mind last time you did this presentation. You're like, yeah, you don't have to have one in your garage. I'm like, that's where a lot of batteries are stored. Like, what the?
Exactly. And a lot of fires start that way. I just had a client just yesterday was telling me they needed their plans because they had a carport fire from charging something in their carport. So I think that, yeah, that's really important. The other thing that is a bit concerning is if you're in a big house, which we're moving to, is being able to locate the fire. Now, that's something that if in residential design is not easy. You actually have to look around for it. The fire brigade did say, though, in a new construction, so we've decided to go with a Hebel floor, so it's a compressed concrete floor. It means that obviously water and smoke are not going to spread through as quickly, and the fire won't spread as quickly. We've got fibre cement sheeting on the outside. Yes, we have plasterboard and insulation, but he basically said if this was a newer house, there probably would have been a lot less damage because we should be notified a lot quicker because smoke detectors should have really worked quicker than they did. And hopefully, because of the way it's constructed, we've got a suspended concrete slab on the other floor as well, that it stops it from spreading from floor to floor.
Just to clarify, so you were saying before identifying the fire, the reason why you couldn't identify the fire is, I'm assuming, all the alarms were going off at once.
Yes.
So you can't work out where it is unless you visually go and find it.
Yeah, and that's exactly what would happen in the event. That, to be honest, if we heard all the fire alarm going off, the first thing I would do is get my kids out of the house, and then I would go back to investigate, because as much as I want to try and put out a fire, it's not always possible to do that. We have a fire extinguisher? We didn't before. So now we have a fire extinguisher and a fire blanket. People put them in the most obvious places, which is kitchens. I'd probably suggest having more than one, because you might not be able to get to the fire extinguisher or the fire blanket if you need to. The other thing is making sure that you do have your phone close by, because if you can't call the fire brigade, and we were on a main road, and I was standing there with my kids with no shoes, nothing, no one stopped. So it's, having to flag down someone to help you, wouldn't be great. The other thing is, we're also putting security screens on the top floor. So CrimSafe do these, where you can open them from the inside and get out. And that's a big thing, because if you've got security screens on every single door and window, and you need to get out through a door or window, you're going to have to smash glass. I've also taught my girls that in the instance that they were trapped in their bedrooms, to throw their doona cover over after they, smash the glass, so they can safely climb out, because obviously it's padded and it's thick. So we've had those conversations about what to do in that instance, and also having the doors being able to easily be opened without a key. So that was actually the most scary thing for me, is being trapped inside and not being able to get out, and having to try and not only potentially jump down one floor, like what do I do if I have to throw the kids out the window and a dog, or carry a dog with me. So I think having just, if there was 3 or 4 doors that were key locked. So, and some of them have 2 keys, because they have a security screen and a main door, and then trying to find which key in the dark is virtually impossible. So they were I guess the main things. What I didn't know though, and what I learned at the event, was having the smoke detectors with the emergency lighting.
I've spoken to so many people about that since.
Yes. So I think we will be upgrading. We haven't quite got to that stage yet. Apparently it's only a small upgrade cost per smoke alarm. So we will definitely be upgrading, because that for me made everything a lot worse, because we couldn't see. So if we had to try and get out in the middle of the night in complete black darkness, at least we would have been able to follow, the lights in the hallway, or, see where the next one is, and at least, light up the stairs that way, or even encourage the girls to have a little torch by their bed or something, so that they know how to get out. But we certainly never had a fire plan. We will have now. Yeah.
I'm exactly the same. Like I said, one of the first things I did was go and learn how to manually open a garage door. It makes me seem so dumb and stupid, but I had no idea how to do it. So I was like, right, someone teach me, if I'm stuck in the garage and the power's out, how do I open this damn door? And then your evacuation plan and all of those sort of things.
Exactly. And I'd say most people wouldn't know how to manually open a garage door. It's not something I've ever thought I needed to do. I think that if I really had to stop and think about it, I probably, could have had a go. But yeah, I think it's unfortunate that and my kids sort of said something to me, is we don't know anyone else who's had a house fire. So, and I said, well, it's an unlucky thing to have happen. But I always thought that if we would have a house fire, it's because, we were careless, or we left something on, or, there's an electrical fault, or some other reason. I really didn't think it would be from a battery explosion. And I think it's just getting the knowledge out there that can be, a pretty serious cause of a very large fire quickly. Would be my message to get across to people, is to think a little bit more about the types of charges you're using, mixing charges, and where they're being charged as well.
So I think, just to recap what I picked up obviously from the first presentation and now here today, in terms of design, trying to have alternate access ways to get out if you're blocked by the fire, trying to increase the width of your hallways and things like that to allow easy movement, having the emergency lighting built into the smoke alarms, things like that, having an evacuation plan so you know instinctively what to do when things go wrong. Like I said, having your keys and your phone nearby, and shoes, so you grab that sort of stuff and run, and trying to look at alternatives to the key lock sort of windows and doors, so that you're not trapped in this house. Just things like that now.
Yes, yeah, that's right. And I mean, we're doing keyless door entries. They open very easily from the inside. The great thing about them is they're battery operated as well. So you always need to make sure, if you do hardwire anything, that they have a battery backup, because we don't want to be in a situation where we'll let the garage door and you need to have the key to open them to get out. And I think that's definitely the most important thing to look for is thinking about safety is number one, and realizing that this could happen to you and your family or someone that you know.
Okay, so is there anything else you want to sort of add out there that you might have forgotten? Anything else before we
There's
wrap it
probably
up?
a lot. It's funny because it's been now 18 months and my kids have actually handled it really well. They don't like alarms going off very often.
Understandably.
And I think getting kids to understand what the noise sounds like, because my kids probably had never heard it before. So whether they would have actually known what that was, if I didn't wake up or if the fire was in our room, like, would they have known what that sound was? And it just sounds very different to a single alarm. So I think that's something to, you can test them and get them to hear the sound. And now I've tried to explain to them that that's a good thing, other than the fact it's not good that we have a fire, but it's a good thing that it's alerting us and letting us know. There was old Archie Brothers, there was a fire alarm that went off and the kids did panic and they wanted to get outside. And usually you're like, oh, it's just, it's nothing serious, but you just don't know. It could be. So now we just take that a little bit more seriously when we do hear it, just in case.
And I think the other point I failed to mention before, which has just come back to me, is don't just stick to the minimum requirements in terms of putting smoke alarms and things like that. Do take that initiative to go the next step up type thing and put them in every room and all that. Yeah,
definitely. And I think people go, oh, there's so many of them and, they're on the ceiling and they don't look the nicest. But and also you can get them checked regularly. So there's a company called Smoke Alarm Solutions. They're one of them. They will come to your house and actually check them. And I believe they recommend checking them at least every 6 months to a year, making sure they actually work and they're functioning, because there's no point in having them if they're faulty, not working, and understanding, like, if they're making a funny sound, what you need to do to fix them up.
Okay, so I want to say a massive thank you for taking the time to share such a personal story with us. So here's your chance to give your business a plug. Tell us about you, what you guys do, where people can go to get some more information on you.
Definitely. So I'm actually the owner of Concepts Unlimited Design. We are a building design, interior design, and we also do furniture and styling. We specialize mostly in residential, but we do some small commercial projects. We've been around for over 20 years, and in the background, you can see our beautiful interior design studio here. So if you are looking to have not only a beautiful home design, but functional and safe home, we're definitely really keen to work with people and make sure that it ticks all of the boxes, including safety.
Awesome. Thank you so much.
Thank you, Peter.
For all you red tape lovers out there, I have one thing to say. Well, no, actually, I've got three. Number one, the advice provided in these videos is general in nature. It's not site-specific. You would be a silly Billy to go and make financial decisions based on this advice without first checking with the town planner. Don't be a silly Billy. Number two, Brisbane Town Planning is in no way linked to Brisbane City Council. The views expressed in these videos are my own, not council's. So if you don't like them, blame me, not council. Number three, what was my number three? Oh yeah, the views expressed in these videos are accurate at the time of recording. If you're watching this video back 10 years from now, the views may not be so accurate. That's all.